I am Jomana Hassan. In the first of revolution, I was a pharmacy student. I was in the fourth year of my studying. In 2011, when the revolution started, as all students, not all students, as a lot of Syrian, I get involved of demonstration, protests against Assad regime. Sorry. First of all, I will talk about my experience in prison for 10 months. In 2013, after my activity and helping people, people who are affected by Assad regime, like people who were replaced from other areas. I was with a small group, helped them with medicine, clothes, finding places to live, and treatment. So I was arrested in 2013 in the front of my family, and I stayed for 23 days under torture. The first day of my detainee.
أكيد أحبتي.
23 يوم أنا ضليت تحت التعذيب. بداية كان التعذيب إنه غطوا عيوني، حطوني بمكان بين معتقلين تحت التعذيب. باليوم الثالث من اعتقالي بلش التعذيب بالكرسي الألماني اللي بتوقع إنه التسمية إجت من الألمان. وبعدين بالكهرباء. طبعا ما كان في أي خبر عن عائلتي أو خبر عني لعائلتي.
She preferred to speak in Arabic because it's so tough for her. She said that I spent 23 days under torture. They closed my eyes and they put me in a place where everybody around me is being tortured. So I was just listening to people being tortured. And then they started to torture me. So the first thing is that I tried what is called the German chair, and I think that its name comes from Germans. And then they started to torture me by electricity, so by electrical shocks. And during all that time, I had no news about my family, where they are they safe or not. And at the same time, my family didn't hear anything back from me.
خلال فترة 23 يوم كنت بمكان كله شباب. يوميا عم اسمع صرخات الشباب اللي ممكن تموت تحت التعذيب. اللي أحد المرات أثناء التعذيب ضرب شاب والشاب وقع علي. فكانت هاي 23 يوم هي من أقصى الأيام اللي مرت بحياتي. انتقلت بعدها لفرع فلسطين اللي هو فرع أحد أفرع النظام السوري المعروف بالقسوة وبالتعذيب وبحالات الاختفاء القسري.
During the very first 23 days, I was in a place that was full of other men being tortured, and I was the only woman there. I was listening to them shouting and screaming of pain, and I couldn't figure out if they were killed or just, I couldn't figure out if they were killed under torture. Once during these 23 days, a guy was hit forcefully in front of me, and then he fell over me dead. The 23 days were the most difficult days that I have ever lived in my whole life. Afterwards, they moved me to Palestine branch. It's called Palestine branch, but it is one of the security forces detention centers, which is very well known of its fierce and most dangerous detention centers in Syria. It is very well known about the number of Syrian people who went there and they disappeared. No one knows where they are.
9 شهور كنت يوميا عم شوف نساء تدخل المعتقل، نساء تخرج من المعتقل، نساء مع أطفال، نساء أعمارها نساء متقدمة بالعمر بال60 وبال70، صبايا تحت ال16 أحيانا. صادفت أكثر من بنت كان أعمارها بالمعتقل 14 15 16، ممكن تكون مع أمها، ممكن تكون لوحدها. طبعا بفرع فلسطين نفس الشيء، لكن كنا بغرف صغيرة غير كافية لأنه تنام بالشكل الطبيعي، إضافة لأنه كمان رح تسمع يوميا أصوات الناس اللي عم تتعذب، اللي هن دائما عم يكونوا شباب.
I spent 9 months in that detention center, and every single day I saw women getting in or getting out of that detention center, women with their kids, women, elderly women, of 60 or 70 years old, young girls under 16. I've seen girls in detention centers who are 14, 15, 16 years old. Some of them are detained with their mothers, others were alone. In that detention center, which is Palestine branch, the same old story. We were subject to torture every day, but the thing that was a little bit different is that we had no space to sleep in. So we were put in large numbers of people in a very small place. It was not sufficient for us to sleep. Usual. In addition to that, every day we used to hear the sounds of young men being tortured to death, and we just heard them screaming and shouting.
بالأشهر الأولى من وجود الفرع فلسطين كان عندي أمل كبير إنه أطلع. طبعاً بهاي الفترة ما كان في أي خبر عن عائلتي، ضليت كل فترة الاعتقال تحت الاختفاء القسري. ما وصل عائلتي إلا أخبار قليلة، منها أخبار إنه أنا مت. بالأشهر ال5 الأخيرة فقدت الأمل من إنه أنا أطلع، فبلشت أرجع لدوري الطبيعي اللي كنت عم مارسه برا. بلشت أعتني بالنساء الموجودين جوا اللي بحاجة لعناية صحية، أحياناً اللي بحاجة لدعم نفسي، بما إنه أنا فكرت إنه أنا ضالة بهاي المكان. كثير قصص يومياً كنا نشوفها، كنا نسمعها.
My very first months in that detention center, during the very first months, I had a great hope that I might be released of prison very soon. But during that time, my family heard nothing about me, and I heard nothing from my family as well. They received very few news, including that I was killed under torture. But during the last months, I started to lose hope, and I started to believe that I'm going to stay there forever. So starting from that point, I started to take up my natural and normal role that I have decided to take before. And then I started to take care of women inside the prison. If they needed medical treatment, I helped them. And I started to do some psychosocial support for them because I felt like I'm not gonna leave that place forever. Many daily stories that happened inside the walls of the prison during these days.
بالشهر السادس أو السابع من وجودي بفرع فلسطين كان هو أول خبر أسمعه عن عائلتي وهو عن طريق صبية إجت على فرع فلسطين. هي كانت جارتنا بالمكان اللي أنا كنت ساكنة فيه. الشيء العجيب إنه أنا فرحت إنه شفتها، مع إنه نحن ما مفروض نفرح وقت نشوف حدا، لكن كان في أمل إنه يكون في أي خبر عن أهلي. كان بالنسبة لي صدمة لأنه خبرتني إنه أهلي بيعرفوا إنه أنا متت. وبعدها بدون تحقيق، بدون أي ما كان عم يصير، ما كان عم يمشي تحقيقي، ما كان عم يمشي أي شيء بأوراقي، فأنا ما في كان أي أمل أطلع لحتى طلعت بتبادل الراهبات اللي كان هو المنفذ الوحيد اللي كان ممكن أطلع من خلاله.
During the 6 or 7 months of me being in detention centers, the very first, after the 7th month, I've heard the very first news from my family. And I was super happy then, but ironically enough, I heard that news from a young woman who was detained by the Assad regime and sent to Palestine branch. She was my neighbor. And from her, I've heard about my family. And I was shocked that when I heard her telling me that your family knew that you were killed under torture. At that time, I was happy to hear any news from my family, although I was not supposed to be happy because the girl who conveyed me the news about my family was detained as well, and that I was not supposed to be happy, but I was happy then. Afterwards, there were no, they were not detecting with me. The process were they were not tackling my documents, or they were not investigating anything with me. So it was a stagnant state. Nothing was moving forward or even backward, and I didn't figure out anything until the process of there was a process of exchanging the
prisoners exchange, that's known as the nuns.
The nuns exchange, when they exchanged nuns with some of the detainees, including me, and because of that, I was released from prison.
أخرج عني بآذار 2014. ضليت بسوريا حوالي 10 أيام. انحرمت من جواز السفر بهذه الفترة، من دراستي، تنفصلي من الجامعة، وملاحقتي من فرع الأمن السياسي مرة ثانية، فاضطريت إنه أطلع على لبنان بطريقة غير شرعية لحالي. طبعا كان شيء خطر جدا، لكن ما كان أخطر من الوضع في حال أنا ظليت بسوريا. فجأة بلبنان لقيت حالي إنه لوحدي، بدون أهلي، بدون دراستي، بدون شغل، بدون أصدقاء.
Okay. I was released in March 2014. I stayed in Syria for 10 days to discover that I was deprived from my passport because they deprived me of my civil rights. I was deprived from my studies because I discovered that they kicked me out of the university. And I discovered that I was pursued by the political branch, the political security branch. So they were pursuing me, and then they wanted to detain me as well. So I was forced to leave my country illegally. So they smuggled me to Beirut, to Lebanon. It was so dangerous for me, but it was not but it was less dangerous than staying in Damascus, and to be subject to all these dangers, to be detained again by the Syrian regime. In Lebanon, suddenly I found myself alone. I was smuggled to Lebanon by myself. My family stayed there in Syria. So I had no family, no friends, and no job, and no one to be around me in a very strange country.
ال10 أيام اللي بسوريا كانت هي الفرصة الأخيرة لأشوف أهلي من حوالي 5 سنين، وحتى يعني كانت الفرصة الأخيرة لدراستي لكن بلبنان اضطريت إنه أرجع أبدأ حياة جديدة، أدور على شغل جديد، أصدقاء جداد، أحاول إنه أدرس من أول وجديد. فانضميت لمنظمة النساء الآن، اللي هي منظمة لتمكين المرأة السورية لأخذ دورها السياسي، الاقتصادي، الاجتماعي بالحياة العامة. كان دوري هو مدربة إسعافات أولية، إضافة لأنه كنت مسؤولة عن العناية الصحية. دربت حوالي 600 امرأة أو أكثر بالمخيمات، إضافة لنفس العدد تقريباً بالمركز.
These 10 days, my last 10 days in Syria, it was my last opportunity that I had to see my family. And I said goodbye to my family members that even I haven't seen for 5 years. And it was my last time to say goodbye to my university and to quit my dream in pursuing my studies. In Lebanon, I was obliged to start my life anew because I didn't want to surrender. So I built my new life. And I found new friends, and I started to take my role again. So I joined the Women Now, which is a development center or organization for empowering women. And the empowerment was political, social, and economical. For women to take up their role in the public life. My role was I was a first aid trainer, and I was responsible for healthcare courses or activities. So I trained over than 600 women inside camps in Beqa, which is, to the borders of Syria. And I trained almost the same number of women who attended the center to take up these courses.
بنفس الوقت بلشنا كمجموعة شباب وصبايا ناخذ دورنا بتغطية أخبار اللاجئين بلبنان اللي كانوا بحاجة لأي حدا يغطي أخبارهم، سواء تعرض لعنف، تعرض لاستغلال، تعرض النساء للزواج المبكر، أي انتهاكات كانت تصير سواء من قبل الحكومة اللبنانية أو من قبل أي حدا، أي انتهاكات عنصرية. فكنت عم غطي هاي الأحداث كحدا إعلامي أخذ دور، بس هو ما هو إعلامي لكن للحاجة. صبايا بين 13 و 18 بالإسعافات الأولية، بنفس الوقت رفع التوعية حول الزواج المبكر. بنفس الوقت كمان كنت عم آخذ دوري بالنساء الآن من خلال تدريبات العدالة الانتقالية والمواطنة وحقوق الإنسان. فكان بلبنان بالنسبة لي كان في أكثر من دور، ربما عوضوني عن دراستي لأنه ما كان في أي فرصة لحتى أرجع أدرس، خاصة أنه وضعي كان غير شرعي.
At the same time, a group of young men and women started to cover the news of the Syrian refugees in Lebanon, and we covered the news of violence practiced against these refugees, and we covered the news of early marriages that was, the young Syrian girls were forced into, and any other kinds of violations against the Syrian refugees, either by the Lebanese government or any other bodies. We also covered all the racist incidents that were taken against the Syrian refugees. I covered all these, me and my colleagues, we covered this news as media people or journalists, despite the fact that we were not journalists, but we were forced to cover the news because we were the only people who could speak up. And at the same time, I kept my work with the women now, and I was working with Malala School, and it was called Malala School because it was supported by Malala Zai. I was training young girls aged between 13 and 18 on first aid courses, and I was raising awareness regarding early marriage. And at the same time, I kept working with the women now through trainings on transitional justice, citizenship, and human rights. In Lebanon, I took up more than one role because I felt that this could compensate me of all the things that I went through. They compensated me from my family, and they felt my time there. And they compensated me from my studies because I was deprived from my university, and it was impossible to continue my studies in Beirut because I was illegal there.
Thank you so much, Jomana. That was wonderful.